What's good, everybody? Who's hungry for that ProRevenge fix? I know I am. Let's dive in. We'll never see each other again. Think again. I was bullied relentlessly from 3rd to 7th grade by multiple people in my class or upper grades. After I graduated 8th grade, I received a Facebook message from Andy, a boy who had been bullying and harassing me from the very beginning of it all. I would post the exact message, but it was extremely vulgar and long. He ended it by saying that since we would never see each other again, he could put it all out in the open about how much of an idiotic, ugly, and loser I was. Of course, he used more colorful dictionary with those words, but you get the idea. However, there was one problem. My parents owned a large wood chipper. Andy's father owned a tree cutting business and would often rent it from them for the much larger jobs. During the summer, I noticed him walk in and start talking to my uncle, and I realized the golden opportunity I had been given. I loaded Facebook on my laptop and bring the message up. I then approach his dad and tell him, "Your son sent this message to me a few days after graduating, and I think it's really important you read it." He raised an eyebrow at first, but took my laptop. As he read, I could visibly see his face turn blood red and his hands shake as he gripped the sides of my laptop harder and harder. I think he reread the entire thing over again just to make sure what he was reading, and even clicked the profile to make sure it had indeed been his son who sent it. Finally, he gave me my computer back and told me he was so sorry for his son's behavior and language, and that he would most certainly be dealing with Andy the moment he got home. It took 2 months for me to hear back about the fallout. Andy's older and way nicer brother, Grant, was friends with my sister, who told her and then she told me. Andy was grounded for the entire summer, fall, and winter break. His parents canceled a trip he was going to take to the beach with their student youth group at church, canceled his summer camp trip, going to hold him back from getting his driving permit for a full year, took away his games and computer. Instead of going with his dad and brother on their hunting trips, he would be sent to his grandparents' house to help clean. His social media passwords were changed so he didn't have access to them, delete his Xbox account, and Andy would have to work for his dad doing tree cutting the entire summer and winter holiday. There were more punishments, but I honestly cannot recall them. I ruined his life for a good 2 to 3 years, and destroyed the relationship he had with his father and mother, but they certainly no longer saw him as their well-behaved youngest child. It was so satisfying. He had to write some really rude stuff in that message. Anybody else super curious about what he put in that message? For his parents to react that way? He done messed up. Sketchy tenant skipped town, owing several months' rent, and stole our Keurig. We tracked him down and ruined his career. I'm changing names and cities and even occupations around slightly, for obvious reasons. I've lived in the Los Feliz area for 10 years now. I came to LA from Oregon to attend college. I never did finish college, but I did meet my husband there. I'm 34 now. My husband, Jim, 41, and I run a small craft store. We also play music in a band. Jim is also an architect part-time. Neither the store nor the band earn a lot of money, but it's enough. We mostly depend on Jim's architect job. Still, we could use more income, so we decided to take on a tenant in our house. We bought a 2-bedroom bungalow where one of the bedrooms actually has its own private entrance. My husband made alterations to make it its own small apartment, since it already had a private bathroom. It didn't initially have a shower, but my husband built one for it. There was no proper kitchen, but my husband fashioned a little nook where he installed a mini fridge, hot plate, and microwave. Over the past 4 years, we had a couple of really nice tenants, usually college students who stayed for their year-long lease, then moved on. Everyone paid their rent on time and didn't ruin the room. Kevin was a different matter. Kevin was a 30-year-old bartender who worked at a local club. He seemed clean-cut and like he wouldn't cause any trouble, and since he was older than the college students we had before, we assumed he would be more responsible. We couldn't have been more wrong. After about 4 months that passed without incident, suddenly Kevin began to be a terrible tenant. He'd play music really loud late at night and make our neighbors call the police. We live in a quiet neighborhood. He'd bring home women, which is his right because it's his home and he's paying, but they'd talk super loudly late into the night and drink out on the porch, and once again cause neighbors to call the police because they just wouldn't shut up. I talked to Kevin about it and he laughed in my face. He kind of had a different attitude toward my husband when my husband confronted him about it, because Jim would break this guy's jaw. But even though Kevin apologized, a few days later he'd go right back to doing it. He also got into the habit of smoking marijuana on the porch, and would smoke so much of it that the neighbors would once again complain. He would pay his rent, but instead of paying it on the first of the month, as one might expect, he was often late by several days, or would ask favors from us that we would take half the rent on the 1st, the other half on the 15th, to coincide with his paydays. He would often pretend to have paid and claim that he left a check under our door when that was clearly a lie. We accommodated him and tried to be patient. He was only on a 6-month lease, so after those 6 months my husband told him he had to leave. Kevin complained that we were being racist against him. Kinda weird seeing as how we are all white in this story, but Kevin fancies himself to be black for whatever reason, and talks with a ridiculous, almost cartoonish attempt to sound like a 1970s blaxploitation movie. On some days he'd try to talk like he was Shaft, and on other days he'd try to talk with some failed Tupac impression. Anyway, so he said he'd move out, but that we'd have to give him time. That's fair enough. We gave him all the legal papers that said he had to vacate within a certain number of days. At the end of that time, he still wasn't gone and he didn't look like he had plans to leave. He would rant about squatters' rights and all that. This whole time, he would continue to play loud music, smoke weed outside, bring home his women and talk loudly late into the night, and make a nuisance of himself. Finally, after 6 months had passed and he had been staying half a year without paying a cent, he moved out. My husband and I learned our lesson. He knocked down the wall he built, and now we live in a 2-bedroom small house again, to ourselves. But Kevin didn't leave in a good order. He snuck out because he knew he owed us several months of rent. He left no forwarding address. He stopped answering texts. What he did leave was a huge mess. He also stole a nice Keurig coffee machine that we put in his apartment for his use. And he also stole the mini fridge and microwave. He left the hot plate, but he pretty much destroyed that too because it looked like he tried cooking drugs on it. It looked like he picked up most of his personal stuff, but his clumsy, sloppy self didn't check behind all of his little nooks and crannies. And we saw he had abandoned lots of his little drug paraphernalia. Bongs, what looked like glass dicks for smoking crack and whatnot, even a small bag of grass. We boxed up all of these little items in a single box and labeled it with his name in case he ever wanted to claim them. My husband also went to the local courthouse to see about filing small claims on Kevin, but we didn't even know where he lived now. My husband isn't a narc type who snitches. Bless his heart. He was of the opinion, oh, this is a learning experience. Let's do differently from now on. But I'm not that way. I don't want us to get ripped off without a bit of revenge. Kevin never really told us exactly which bar he works at, because he's a lying little weasel. But in his loud conversations late at night, while he's off talking like he's Charles frickin' Barkley, I overheard him name the bar he worked at. So one day about 5 days after Kevin left, I drove over there and asked about him to the people who work there. I don't let on that I'm one of his former landlords. The new bartender girl assumes that I am some sort of jilted lover, and I roll with it. She empathizes with me, and in talking about what a jerk Kevin is, she lets me know that the whole time he's been in the LA area, he's been going to school to become a licensed vocational nurse. I tell her that he blocked me on social media. No problem, she tells me. She whips out her phone and shows me his profile, which is set to private, but she is friends with him on social media. I see that he moved to Nevada and is now practicing as a licensed vocational nurse at a clinic. I thank the girl and go home. Now that I know where he works, I call the clinic and casually confirm that Kevin indeed works there. My guess is that Kevin probably had to take a drug test to get his job, but he still had friends over at his place doing lots of illegal stuff, or maybe he borrowed someone else's urine, who knows. I find out the name of his supervisor, and once again calling the clinic, pretending to be a customer, I casually confirm that this man is Kevin's boss. I then take the box of Kevin's stuff with all of his drug paraphernalia into the local police station, with the explanation that Kevin used to be a tenant of mine and my husband's, but that he abandoned his quarters and also this box of his personal effects. I look like a friggin' kindergarten teacher, and to the cop, it's obvious I have no idea what any of this crap is. I tell the police I have no idea of Kevin's forwarding address, just his address of employment. And oh, I even have the number of his boss. I don't know how these things work, officer. Could you handle it? Of course, miss. That's our job. So a month later, my husband and I are still out of Keurig, and 6 months of unpaid rent from Kevin. But calling the clinic again, pretending to be a relative, asking, "May I speak to Kevin?" I find out. Oh, Kevin doesn't work here anymore. Didn't he tell you? He got fired. Sheesh, this secretary kind of overshares, but it works out in my favor here. I also found out by talking to that officer again that the marijuana wasn't such a big deal, but that the possession of the hard drug paraphernalia was a big misdemeanor. My husband, who knows about what I did by this time and is fully on board, comes with me to the station and we sign an affidavit regarding what we know about all this crap in the box. They had contacted Kevin, and under pressure from the police in ours and his new state, he finally admitted that the items were his. After, of course, trying at first to lie and claim the drug items were mine and my husband's. Scumbag. So now the misdemeanors are on his permanent record, rendering him unemployable in his field. We also found out his address, and he was served with papers for small claims court for several months worth of rent, theft, and damages. He was a no-show, automatic victory for us. We're not holding our breath for this loser to actually pay us our money, but still, it felt good to win. My husband and I went to the bar where Kevin used to work, and since she recognized me, the new bartender girl gave me a big hug. I admitted I wasn't a girlfriend of Kevin's, but that he was a tenant who screwed over my husband and I. The girl thought that what I did was great to get him busted. Speaking of busted, he was charged with possession at his new apartment and is in jail. She did say, "Aren't you scared he'll come back to get revenge?" My husband laughed and said, "I hope he does, because if he tries anything, I'ma break his f***ing jaw. You're friends with him on social media. You can tell him I'm waiting. Little 130-pound cracked out midget vanilla ice looking goof. Ha, I hope they have social media in prison." Damn, like come on, nobody steals a Keurig in 2019, and he's a nurse. Doesn't he know the drugs are bad? Okay. Alright everybody, voice your opinions on if you think Santa Claus is real in the comments below, and we'll see you all in the next one. Peace.